So this is the LINKFRESH Nav application, and we're starting at the Role Center, which is the front page and the main focus and the dashboard for anybody when they first start the system in the morning. This is a Role Center specifically configured as part of the LINKFRESH farming module to give us information that relates predominantly to the crops that we're working with and to give us quick access into that information. The blue tiles here provide us quick links into our particular current harvests. If we want to look at historic harvests, then we can drill straight in using these buttons and go and look at the details. So for example, if I click on our active harvests, then I will get a list of the current crops that are in progress. If I return back to the front screen, as you can see on the right hand side, I've got an immediate graph that just showed me my target quantity, and this is by item. So in this particular case, we only currently have one item that we're going to be using for the demonstration purposes today. But this will allow us to track, and again, this information is updated in real time so that we can get very quick access into the data and drill down on that summary level of information to get into the detail and ultimately down to the costs that make up the profitability of the business. Down the left-hand side, we have, again, quick links into different areas of the system. So we start with harvests and the jobs across the top, and then we have the more kind of day-to-day activity of work orders, plus some setup information around what we refer to as the growing bill of resources. So in terms of the information that we capture within the system, there are many different areas that we're going to use as part of the LINKFRESH farming module. In terms of setup, one of the first things that we will do is to set up our growers. So we can have an unlimited number of growers, we can associate these with specific vendors, and we can also track against the growers the sites, the fields, the plots, the greenhouses, the different crop areas that we might be using as part of this. So for example, in this growing site, we have our demonstration farm. At the bottom immediately it is showing us the plots that are available within there and the areas of the plots that are in use. So in this case we have two plots, both of 150 acres, and you can also see we can store the latitude and longitude of those plots so that when we're sending instructions to workers as to where to go to, we can give them the exact GPS location of the field they're heading to. And in this case we are going to refer today to farms and fields, but it could equally be greenhouses or vineyards or any other type of area that we might be planting a crop on. So we have this structure with growers who are linked to growing sites. The growing sites have growing areas, and within growing sites we have growing plots, and at this level we will maintain the areas that are available. You'll also notice we have the ability to record additional areas against the plots. So in this case, the 150 acres logged for plot 1 is the main planning unit. That's the unit we will always use when we're trying to identify any planning measures and if we're calculating requirements. But we can record additional areas. So for example, if we have insured a different area to the actual area that we're going to plot, then we can store that information, and this is used for recording purposes. We can also record, and we can record as many of these additional areas as required for reporting purposes. So that's our growers and the growing site information that we can hold. We also then have resources that we're going to use to complete our tasks. So we've got some sample resources set up here. We've got a tractor, a planter, and then 2 people that we're going to use for this. We can track the cost per hour, and we can track this in multiple units, so it could be by mile, by kilometre. In this case we're going to use hours for the examples for today's demonstrations, but as I say, that could be multiple or different units of measure located against the record. So if I open up a resource card, we can see we get the information of the tractor. We can group our different resources together. So in this case they're grouped purely by whether they're people or machines. And we can set up the standard unit cost that will apply for using this resource when completing a job. We'll also have a unit price, so actually if we're billing this to somebody else and want to charge them a different rate, then obviously we can ensure that we're achieving a profit against the use of this resource. Additionally, we have the option within the LINKFRESH section here to link to our employee records or to a fixed asset number, And we can also specify that this cost should be separated out from the cost of the crop, so that when we do cost analysis, we can actually see the usage of a particular resource reported separately. If we leave the cost element blank, it will just be added to the cost of the crop. So we have multiple resources. If I now switch back to the LINKFRESH farming module, we can build up what we refer to as the growing task bill of resources. So where standard manufacturing would have bill of materials, which effectively gives us the recipe for making a particular item, for our farming operations, we use the growing task bill of resources that gives us the different tasks that we'll need to complete in order to grow our crop. So for example, if we were doing some planting, in this case, we're showing that we're going to use a planter, we're going to use our resource Jim, and we'll be, in this case, using some seed corn. And we can plan these either as a standard quantity for the completion of the job, or we can plan it as a quantity per unit of area. And when we then apply this task to a particular job, it will take the area located against the particular crop, multiply it by this value to get a calculated value. So we can have a bill of resources that will adapt based on the area automatically and will calculate the necessary requirements in order for us to complete the task. And you can also see it's immediately brought through the unit costs of the particular items. So in creating our crops, we'll go into our job record, and if we open up the job list, we can see we've got 2 demonstration items. So I'm going to go ahead and create a third one. I'm going to select the item that I'm going to grow. So again, I'm going to use my white waxy corn. I'm going to pick the grower that I'm using, the site code for where this operation is going to take place, which area it's in, and the growing plot. So in this case, we'll use plot 1. And at this point, I also give it an estimate for how much we expect to harvest from this particular field. So this will be in the base unit for this particular crop. So for the white waxy corn, if I look at this, my base unit to measure is in bushels. So I need to log how many bushels I expect to take off this. So I'm just going to use a fairly simple 20,000. I need to select where my location is, and this is where my crop will effectively get harvested to at the end. So I'm going to use my farmer location, and which crop cycle it belongs to. So for analysis purposes, I can tag a crop cycle against each of the different jobs in order that I can come back and separate the different jobs and also separate out allocation of costs for different cycles. So if I have a multi-cycle, a plot that I'm going to plant more than once a year, then I may wish to split this up into different cycles. For simplicity for today, I've just split them into years. So I'm going to add it to my 2015 crop year, and that's my initial crop record set up. All I've said at this stage is the item that I'm growing, where I'm growing it, and how much I expect to grow from the location. My next job then is to go and create the tasks that will form part of this job. So I can switch into my job task view, and I have the option to create my growing tasks. It will bring up the list of the bills and resources that are appropriate, and I can select which items I want to bring in. Hit OK, and it will populate that information through onto my job task lines. If I now drill into my task lines and look at what's actually been planned, we'll see it's brought through the resources from my bill of resources. It's put the initial planning date in as today, and I can then go through and amend those for when I think this is actually going to happen. And we'll also see it's taken this quantity per unit of area, it's multiplied it by the area that's logged against the particular plot that we're working with. So in this case it was 150 acres, and it's turned that into a total number of hours in this case that we're going to need. And that gives me starts to give me my initial plan. So at this stage I'm just going to switch to one of the other jobs which I've already set up. So we'll go to field 2 and we'll look at this one. So again, I'll go to my job task lines, and we'll see on the job task lines view, it's showing me all the different tasks that I've got to complete. It's also showed me the dates that these have been planned in for from when I initially set the plan up. So I've got field preparation happening today, I'll be doing planting next week, and I'll spray it the following week, and then inspect it 4 weeks later. It's also brought through for me a total cost that is expected as part of the growing operation in order to grow this crop. So this 6250 represents the total value of these 3 tasks that are going to be completed, where we're using 3 hours of the tractor, 3 hours of bulb, and an hour of gym. Will cost us $62.50. So we've immediately got a budget for growing our crop, and as we start recording activity against that, we'll start to see these usage prices populate, which actually will start to give us a budget to actual position on the crop as we go through the life cycle. So that's my initial crop plan set up, and I can use the standard NAV manufacturing planning tools to actually run a requirements plan to tell me what stock I'm going to need when and how much of it I will need on any particular date. And it will go through and it will automatically create a purchase plan for me in order to fulfill these dates that have been specified in the system. I can also start to record activity against this. So within our jobs, we can also then have work orders. And this would be where we're actually going to go out and complete one of these tasks and get a user to record the activity that they've completed. So I can manually create a work order, or I can look at what tasks are coming up for this particular week. So if I open up my overview screen, it shows me all the different tasks that are coming in, listed out by job, by the task number, and I can start to allocate these to particular work orders. And all I simply need to do is find one that's I can go through, select the task that I want to allocate, choose create works orders, and it will go ahead and it will create a work order. So immediately works order 96 has been created for me. And we can see it then copies the work order number in. So I can actually see the ones which have got work order numbers allocated against them have already been planned to the system, and we can start to record activity using these. And this just gives me a quick view of all the tasks that need to be completed. By default, it's opened it up with today's date, and in fact it's for this week. I can change my date range, so I can look at anything through to the end of the month, and I can see I've got some tasks for the 18th for job 1180, some tasks the 25th, and the same again for job 1190. And again, I can just go through, tick on the add to work order box, click the create work orders, and it will create all the work orders I need. So if I do the bottom set of these, and it will actually split it by task, so I will get one work order per group of job task numbers. Create the work orders, and we can see in this case it's created 2 of them starting at number 97. And we can see here it's allocated 97 and 98 to this particular job. If I now go and look at my work order list, we can see here's my work orders created. And so let's look at work order 95. And we can see it's very similar to the information that I originally had on the job task lines. It showed me the resources I need to complete this. You notice it's stripped out all the cost information because we may not want everybody to have access to the cost detail. So instead the work order is purely just around the quantities that are recorded. We're given them the details of what date this job's planned for, the crop that they're going to be working on, and the location that they need to go to in order to work on this. I can then record, so I can release this work order. At the point they start it, they can record the time they've started. At the point they finish, they can record their finish time. So let's make that 1 in the afternoon. And they can record the time that they've actually spent doing this. So in this case, we're going to make these 4 hours rather than the original 3. Now this original one was planned to be 1 hour, and it was based on a standard, whereas the other 2 were based on a quantity per area. So I'm going to leave the last one as 1 hour. Once I'm happy, I can mark it as complete. I do have the option to complete a review against this, so if there's any comments or feedback that needs to be completed as part of this, and I can make this information mandatory so that somebody must actually go through, confirm they've reviewed it prior to this being posted. But once I'm happy with the data that's in here, I can hit post, and the system is going to go away and create a job journal for me. And I'm going to go ahead and open that. So here's my job journal. As we can see, it's brought in the details that are on my work order. This is kind of my final review step. I can bypass this step and actually have it that when I post the work order, it will just go ahead and automatically post the related journal for me. In this case, I've got it left in the review mode, which actually will open up the job journal for me. I can just double check. I now get the cost information, so I can just make sure they're correct. I can check that all the locations are populated, and if, for example, I was using any items in here and it required additional information, then I can go ahead and add that information at this stage. I'm happy with the information that's there, so I'm going to go ahead and post this, and we see that's successfully posted. So this is job 1190, and we'll go and see the impact that that's just had. So we'll say OK to that. You can see my job journal now clears. My work order's disappeared because it's now completely posted. If I go back to my job, and now go drill into my job task lines, we can see over here we've now got some usage costs which have been posted. And again, I can drill into these and get back to the original data that actually makes this up. So we can see there's my 4 hours posted against this particular task. And throughout the life of this crop, I can record all the different tasks that make this the costs of the load up in order that we can go forwards. And at every point, we've got the costs and how much of the total budget we have incurred at this stage. Once we've gone all the way through and completed all of the works orders and posted them and reviewed the costs, we can then start to think about harvesting this crop. So against the harvest tasks, we can do exactly as before, that we can build the resources that will be needed in order to complete this particular task, and we can post the work orders in exactly the same way for the harvest. But the harvest task also has an extra function attached to it, and that's that we can actually start to record the quantity that we have harvested off here. So I can record that I've posted a harvest for 10,000 bushels, and I can choose where this has gone. So I have 3 options on my destination type. I can leave it blank, and that will just leave it in my farm location that I originally specified on the job, and the stock will automatically be created there. Alternately, I can choose to automatically ship it straight off to a customer, or I can do a location transfer to put it to a different location that's available within my system. For this particular one, I'm going to leave it in the bank location, which will put it into the location called farm. And I simply enter the harvest quantity and click post harvest up on the header. Click yes, and as quick as that, we can see the crop harvest gets completed and we get some amounts calculated. And what we'll see as we scroll across now is we've started to get some contract costs being processed. So we can actually see that we've had some costs which are related to effectively the creation of our crop. And so this is the current valuation of our crop. Because we've only incurred costs of $80 so far, and we originally said we were going to harvest 20,000 bushels, and we've just recorded the harvest of 10,000 bushels, it's apportioned the costs incurred and allocated them to this particular crop. Now, of course, normally we would have processed all of the previous tasks. I've only done the first one, hence this number is very low. But as I start to add on the other jobs, this would get revalued, and so our cost would continue to build up as both our cost of sale or our inventory value, depending on where the stock is at that point. And if I need to post another harvest, then I can just insert a new line. just indent that, and this makes sure the totaling continues to work. I can record another harvest quantity. This time I'm going to ship it straight to a customer. And I shall pick my customer from my list. If they've got multiple ship to addresses, then I could pick a destination to, which would be their particular depot that I've shipped to. In this case, this customer just has one location, so I'm going to go ahead and I'll post the harvest to this one. And again, the crop harvest gets calculated and gets posted, and we'll see for this line, we've now taken the proportion of the cost related to that 5,000, so we've taken a quarter of the costs, and so we've taken $20 of value into the crop that's been created. And I can also look at what crop has been taken off this field at any point, so I can come up here to my harvest item ledger entries, and when I open the screen, I'll see I've had 2 harvests posted so far, one for 10,000, one for 5,000, and you'll notice my remaining quantity on the first line is for 10,000, but my remaining quantity on the second one is for 0. That's because I've automatically shipped this. So my posting has already gone through, it's created a sales order, and it's processed the shipment against it. And we can see this if we come out of the job for a moment and move to our sales marketing section and find our sales orders. And if I scroll to the last entry in the list, we'll see here's my sales order created for my customer for our item corn white waxy for 5,000 bushels. If I had a set price for this particular customer on contract, it would have pulled the price through. It hasn't, so I can go ahead and enter that now. Oh, excuse me, let me just reopen that before I change the price. And I can release my order, and we'll see it's already set that my quantity shipped is the full 5,000, and I've got 5,000 remaining to invoice. So that sales order is ready shipped. It's based on the harvest that I created, and all I now need to do is raise my invoice against it in order to bill my customer. It does make it a very simple process in just 2 or 3 clicks to record the harvest and ship it away to a customer, and be able to go and collect money against that. So returning to the farming module now, there are some other functions that we have. So as well as posting our harvests, we can also run some shrinkage. So if we're taking a crop, and particularly with corn in this example that we've used for today's demonstration, this may be something that we'll put into store, and while it's in store the moisture content will change, and that will of course cause it to shrink slightly. So we actually have a shrinkage calculation, and all we tell it is what the current moisture level is. So in this case I'm going to tell it that it's now 12%. I can choose whether I want it to update it or whether I just want to preview what the report will actually do at this stage. And at this page, I'm going to use my location which is set up called shrink, which has a bin called shrink in it, which is where I've put the stock that I'm going to use for the demonstration. I can preview the report, and it will show me I've currently got 1 lot in there, lot number 5672. It's in the shrink bin. Previously there was 5,000 at 14%. If we shrink it to 12%, then the remaining quantity will actually be 4,086. If I'm happy with that, and I want to go ahead and update my actual inventory with that, I can rerun the report. I simply tick on the update moisture level of inventory. I can choose whether I want it to create it or create it and post. In this case, I'm going to go with create. So give me a second. So we open up. I preview it and it will give me the report in the background, which shows me, and I can print this off and record it or save it somewhere. I do have the option to bring this out to Excel or to Word, but this shows me the report of what I've actually processed as part of my update process, and it will also create a shrink order which allows us to update the inventory. So this is actually going to consume in the 5,000 original bushels that were harvested, and it will output 4,886 bushels back into the same location, so that we've got that lot tracked with its new moisture percentage, and that will then be available for us to ship off or delete install, and we can run this shrink process as many times as we want, but the system will always maintain the traceability of the original lot number that was generated when we harvested, and will follow it through with the new percentages and the changes to that moisture percentage as it's processed. Some of the other functions we've got within the farming module is clearly we might have some tasks that are going on which are perhaps not related to an individual crop, and we have two ways of capturing these. So we have the concept of a non-field job. So in this case we won't set the growing crop because it's not a particular job, but we will tick on non-field. So I'll tell it that it's for my 2015 crop year, and it's happening based on my farm location. Tick on the non-field option, and I can now create tasks. And again, I have the option to use the create tasks that I used for the original create growing task operation, or I can just enter these manually. So I can just say, well, job number 1. Apologies for a moment. This is for my farm. One of the differences with the non-field jobs is I can make these whether they're billable to the farm as it's my own internal work, or actually I can set it for a different customer, in which case it will allow me to bill somebody else for the fact that I've done work for them on their land. So I can now set my job task number, and it might be that I'm going to go do some mowing. I can create a planning line, so I can say when it's going to happen. It will default to today. I'm going to plan this for tomorrow, and I can pick who I'm going to send to this. So Bob's going to go and do this mowing for us, the farm location, and I expect him to take 3 hours to do this. And this might be that he's going to do farming around a number of fields, tidy up verges. It could be any different task that I want to. So this particular one is mowing, but it could be any kind of maintenance activity or some activity that we want to record that doesn't take place in a field. So I've just got my job task line there. I've still got exactly the same functionality to use my work orders. So I can come back out to my work order screen. I create a new one. I can pick the task, and we can see it drags through the resources that are required with the standard quantities, and I can go ahead and process my work order against the system. At the end of the period, so whether that's the day, the week, the month, I can run a routine, and it will take all of the costs that are incurred against non-field jobs, and it will apply them back to the actual field jobs. So I'm going to increase the value of the field tasks by the value of these overhead activities that I've had to perform during the month. The other way to do this would be from my job screen. I have a crop journal allocation. So I can take a particular resource. So in this case, I've got a line set up for Jim. It's recorded 8 hours. It's brought in a standard unit cost, and I'm telling it I want to allocate it to any jobs from my 2015 crop cycle. I could specify a particular item, and I can choose whether I want to split it equally between jobs or simply to do it by crop size. So I'm going to go with the crop size option. I'll choose my create job journal, and if I now go back and review my job journal, I've now got 3 entries that have been created against my 3 different jobs, so 1180, 1190 and 1200, and it's split them based on the area that is allocated to those particular tasks. So in this case, all the fields were the same size. We get a slight rounding, which gets added to the final job, but it automatically split those, and when I post that, it will go and add it onto the those jobs so that it gets added to the cost. So again, another way of recording overhead. And the final feature I want to show for today's demonstration is that we can also take general journals that are posted. So for example, if I've had my salary that I've entered for the period, and in this case I've got Jim's salary that I've set up, so we're getting a payment for $400, and I've marked it that this is related to job costs. So I have the option to do an allocation, and in this case I'm telling it that I want it to go and find anything that's for resource Jim, and I want to allocate $400 of this cost, and I can choose where I want it to go. So in this case, I did have 4 different allocation methods. So we saw on the previous screen I had 2 methods of equal split or crop size. But in this case, because I've said that it's related to a particular job cost, I can choose also to have it by recorded usage or recorded cost. So usage will take the amount of time that he's recorded in the period, recorded cost will take the actual value that he's recorded in the period, and it will prorata based on those amounts. So I have the ability as well, which is turned on here, to revise the current cost. So what it will do is it will take out any cost that's been posted for Jim in this period. So I've just done it for the first 11 days of November. It will reverse the current cost and it will replace it with the equivalent proportion of this $400. So I'm going to say OK to that. I'm going to go ahead and post my journal. And I know that we used Jim on one of the jobs we looked at just a moment ago. And if I look at my job task line, we'll see my usage cost has changed. So originally we were expecting it to be $80, but actually we can see Jim's entries have been altered. So originally we had one entry of $10, that's now been reversed. That was the one, if you remember, that was a single hour that was recorded manually. However, that's been replaced by the equivalent cost at $36.09 because that's the equivalent of the $400 amount that we assigned when it splits it out by the different tasks that he's assigned to in this period. But as we can see, we've got all of the costs building up throughout the process. We've got the comparison of original to actual, and we can always see exactly where we are with the value of the crop at any time, and we can look at what's been harvested and see exactly what we got for our crop, which gives us some very powerful information for doing our yield analysis and cost analysis that we can use to report on the system. So that concludes today's demo. Are there any questions at this time?